Hey YouTube, and welcome to another part of the series How to Start with Monogame. Today I want to talk about game screens, and I haven't really prepared too much for this one. I've just sat down after work here and going to try to explain to you what game screens are supposed to be. So I'll open one of my own projects just to show you what I mean by game screen, how they work. So if I press F5 here and execute, this is one of my hobby projects or one of my private projects, and I'm just going to use it to show what a game screen is. So what we're looking at right now is a startup screen where the menu lives, and if I press play, it loads a kind of a what I call the main game screen. So they are two separate game screens and they do very different tasks. And in here you have some 3D and whatnot. Let's see actually if we can play around. So, and if I press escape, it unloads the main game screen. It goes back to the startup game screen. So that's basically what game screens are. Now the task to try to code one of these, let's just close this. Also, I want to point out, and I'll put it in the description as well, let's not forget that I have anything I do in this project is going to be uploaded on my GitHub. It's github/slemsvamp, and it's my YouTube game project. But the link will be down in the description, and you can just take any kind of episode out of here through tags. So episode 0, episode 1, episode 2. So it'll be, if it's episode 2, it'll be the code that I ended up with in episode 2, not how it looked like when I started. So enough about that. Let's see. First of all, we want to create a thing called game screen. So let's create a class called game screen. And a game screen is basically like taking the game class. I'm going to open it up just to show you. Sort of taking parts of that out and putting it into different kind of own classes or different layers. So we have an update and a draw function, and we're going to have one in the game screen as well. So let's create a virtual, and actually, sorry, this should be abstract, because we're never going to create, in this form at least, we're never going to create a game screen, just say like a new game screen. We're going to be able to make a startup game screen and a main game, or main game screen. Let's see, public virtual void update. I hope my voice won't fail. Usually when I start talking without having exercised my voice in a little while, I tend to have to clear my throat a lot, so excuse me if that happens. Just talking while I'm writing out these parameters, there we go. And of course it doesn't know what game time is here because we don't have the using statement, so we do our control period little trick here, control period, enter. Okay. Now there's also another function I want here, which is also present in the game one, which is initiate. Or actually not initiate, sorry. Initialize. For some reason I sometimes write initiate. Initialize is a good word. This also means that we want to have a protected boolean called initialized and a public getter for this. There we go. And whenever the game screen initialize is called, we will set initialized. Oh, it goes through. And let me think here. Now I already know as well that I want another boolean, and it's going to be quit, which is when this game screen is done, when it says like, yep, I've done my part. Whether it's a splash screen that just appears for a while on your screen and disappears, it'll say, oh yeah, I'm done by the way. So we want to kind of do the same here. We'll do it protected because we want it to be accessible throughout any class that inherits a game screen, so protected. If you don't really know the difference between protected and public and all these, it's good thing to read up on them. But they are kind of C# related in this sense, so I'm not gonna cover that in this tutorial. So we don't, however, put anything here really. We could, of course, say that whenever you do something in any game screen, then set quit. Right now I don't have any of those such situations. Now something I want to do is also create a game screen manager, and I have my input manager here. I actually feel like just moving them into a folder by themselves, because like in my project, the one I've worked a bit on, I tend to have many managers. So I'm going to make a managers, and some will of course notice or say that input manager doesn't change namespace now when I moved it up here. So usually it would be YouTube game project dot managers, but of course we'll have YouTube game project. I think actually in this case every manager will have a name called input manager, screen manager, game screen manager, sound manager. They won't really clash with anything else, so I prefer having them in the namespace that doesn't require you to add a using statement. So we're going to be careful about that even now when we create a game screen, because if we create it here, add, and we call it game screen manager, it will automatically put it in the namespace YouTube game project managers. So I'll erase that, and let's do this. Now for the game screen manager, I want to have a private stack of game screens, and we'll call them I can't type today, or most days. And we'll have a public getter. Here we go. Whoops. It wanted to correct me there. Oh, that's why I missed a little S. And the game screen manager is actually going to kind of serve us as a kind of almost like the YouTube game does. It's basically where we collect all the game screens and we kind of tell the game screen manager to handle these for us. We'll add them to the game screen manager. The game screen manager will update them and draw them and so on. So what I want here is also the ability to push a game screen onto the stack of game screens. Push. Now one could argue that you could, instead of having this as just a getter, you could have this game screens, and you would just say game screens dot push game screen. This is kind of like, well, in this case it's we're making the intent obvious that we want you to tell the game screen manager to handle this, which means if we ever want to handle how they are pushed to the stack, we'll do it through one place and not have a lot of different places calling this game screens and just pushing it in directly to an array or stack in this case. So this is right now not super useful currently, but if I would like to change how game screens are pushed into the stack, then that would be a lot better. Like I might want to, when I push this, I might want to pop out the previous game screen that was on the top. But right now we're just gonna have a direct push like this. So here we want as well an update, and it'll take a game time as per usual, because we might always want to have that. And let's add the using, and let's have a draw, which takes a sprite batch. Now you might not actually always need a sprite batch, so you'll have to kind of decide these things for yourself, but in a 2D game you basically only use sprite batches everywhere. So, and yeah, now we're going to go to this update and draw function soon and add to these, but we'll start off with adding a few more things that I need. So how you load these game screens will be like up for debate on how to do it. Like you could load them all. You could have, say that you have 10 game screens in your entire game. You could load them all and just switch between them, but that's not like memory efficient. And what if your game actually starts getting really big and bigger and bigger, and it's like takes up 10 gigabytes of memory? So you would rather have it kind of load only the necessary stuff that is required of the game screen. And so what we'll do is, first of all, we have an well, we don't have to have actually an initialize. We'll do most of the initialize in the Gamescreen Manager for the actual Gamescreen Manager. No, actually, I think this is it. We'll get to Gamescreen here again and add the different things. So in here, I would like to have a virtual void load content, and a content will most likely, this is me kind of knowing what I'll need. It's going to need a graphics device, because usually that's how we load content. Actually, well, when you have a content, that's how you load them. Or when you do like texture to the from stream, it takes a graphics device, which is how we load things right now. In the future, I'll have something called a content manager, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. So let's see what we have. I also want to create a second folder today that is called game screens, because I feel like those will also perhaps grow in size. So we'll add a class here, and I'll call it startup game screen, and it's going to be part of the namespace, the general namespace. They will also have a kind of a what would you call it, a naming convention that isn't going to clash too much with anything else. So, and it will inherit game screen. And now comes a bit of a tedious part. We're going to override a lot of these that we inherit from the game screen that are virtual. Let's see, we update, and last but not least, the nice part about this at least is that it kind of handles a lot of the rewriting of things by itself. And actually we'll let these, I'm tempted to just take these away, but we might actually need some of them, so it's probably easier like this. And for this one we'll have a constructor, because this class we can actually create. The game screen class is just abstract, we just use it to kind of build up how the startup game screen looks. But like we have the quit and we have the initialized here, so it's very important that when we call initialize here that we also call the base initialize, so the initialized flag is set. Okay, I think we're on the home stretch. Now I've kind of coded a part of this before, and I'm going to kind of, instead of just copy pasting the code I had, I'm going to copy paste like some of the notes I created, so that I can code this with you. And one of these things doesn't exist yet, but it's also to kind of remind me. So when we update, oh sorry, this is actually I'm even pasting it in the wrong one. We're going to go to the Gamescreen Manager. Just checking here. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Gamescreen Manager. So what we want to do is check if there are no game screens in the stack. We just quit, because that's basically when we are done right with the game. We don't have any startup game screen. We don't have any main games. We have no game screens. So we're going to just say if game screens count equals 0, YouTube game instance exit. Easy as pie. Now, what if we have game screens? So we're going to make a bit of a loop here. I'm going to explain why the loop is here, because it did, like in my first kind of way of thinking, it wasn't there. So there's a reason. We'll get to it. So look at the first game screen on the stack. So I'm going to save this as well. So the way you do that in a stack is you say game screens peak. We can check what it says, but well, returns the object at the top of the stack without removing it. So it's just peak at the stack. So initialize if it's not initialized. If gs initialized equals false, you just call initialize. Also, this is where you could debate it whether it's good or bad, because now we're in an update. So if we initialize this for the first time, we haven't loaded the content. So I'm going to actually have this called load content. And you could either handle the Gamescreen Manager a graphics device, but we're going to call the graphics device that we have in our YouTube game, because the YouTube game inherits game, which has the graphics device. So we're basically just calling it like this. Kind of easy as well. So for the first time, if it's run for the first time, it'll do this. So we also need to call update, because we need to update the game screen. So we're now in the Gamescreen Manager's update loop. Whenever it's being called, we're going to update any game screen that is on the top of the stack. And it wants the game time. And also now to check, like when we update, there might be a reason that the game screen says, well, I'm done. Like maybe the timer went out, like for fading the screen, or if you pressed escape or something like that. So we'll check if yes, quit. We'll take the game screen stack and just pop. So you pop off the top out of the stack, like the top game screen out of the stack. Now, and do the do while again. So this is why we need a loop, because now we have a new top game screen, or it's empty. But if we have a new top game screen, we don't want it to just quit the update, because it might try to draw afterwards, and we don't have an initialized and content loaded game screen anymore. So we needed to go through the whole process again and check if the game screen is actually if the count is 0. So what we do here is say game screen, and this is where this is needed. So we'll create a bool called game screen popped. I think it needs to be, it can be false from the beginning. And I think actually I missed something, yeah. Every time we run through this, we're going to we have to, game screens, sorry. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry if this is confusing. So we create these boolean outside the loop, because we can't write this while statement if we try to create the game screen popped inside this do while. So we create it here, but though the loop will happen multiple times, so I have to reset the game screen popped. So it looks a bit weird that you have to set this twice. The first time around it'll seem kind of unnecessary, but it's what it does, because we're going to say game screen popped equals true down here. So if the game screen that we're working on quits, it popped out, and then a new game screen is on the top of the stack. And when we come back here, we want it to say, well, game screen, we haven't popped this game screen, right? This is a new one, so that's why we set it to false, so it doesn't loop again. Yes. Now is the draw. We're going to do this. Let me just think here. Is it safe to, yeah, because since this loop will always kind of go like, well, you know, it manages the kind of popping out of the stack and stuff. If the stack is ever empty, we will have quit the game immediately. So draw will always have something in game screens. So we'll look at the top one, and we'll say, oh, actually that kind of means that it will always also be initialized, which means we don't actually have to call this GS, or we don't have to say, we can actually just call it like this. I'm pretty sure we can do that. Now, if this wouldn't work, etc., you might want to check that it's initialized. Like if it's initialized, then draw. But I'm pretty sure this all handles it now when I've rewritten it to have a loop. Okay, so, but right now nothing really does anything. We've created we have created game screen, we have created a game screen manager, we have a thing called startup game screen that doesn't really do anything. It's quite empty. So what I think I want to do is move out all the stuff we had before, like the texture and the sprite. We're going to move it to the startup game screen. So now it's a part of the whatever the startup game screen is, because it's the only content we have right now, which means a few other things won't work, like loading the textures. Don't worry, we'll just put that in the startup game screen as well. It also has a load content. And however, it's not called graphics device anymore. It's called the P graphics device. Oops, P and P graphics device. And of course we need to use the system IO for the file, which actually means we don't need to use it here anymore. We don't need to use input here anymore either, because the input has moved to the input manager. Might as well clean up while we're at it, right? So the tiny mail sprite update should now happen in the startup game screen. It's now part of the startup game screen. And last but not least, the draw. And we'll put that here. Oh, and as you can see, this is now not game time, it's a parameter, so p game time, and same with sprite batch. So I'll just paste this in. There we go. Now there's one thing missing. So we took out a lot of things, but we need to add a very important part here, which is the, oh, also let me just, I've been sloppy here. I'm usually very, like, I want to, you don't have to write private. If you don't write anything, they are private. But yeah, I like to type it out. Looks better with everything. You, of course, do whatever you want. Gamescreen Manager is what we need. And we'll have a public Gamescreen Manager. Oops. Getter. For, you know, kind of to keep the general pattern available, so that we can always, like another game screen should be able to call the game and say, by the way, I want to put this into the game screen manager, so when I quit there's something there to kind of catch up, or if it wants to put a menu in or anything. So when we, oh, and this should be removed. This is, I had on my latest video I showed that you can use the input manager with a gamepad. So I had false, but now I want to have true, which is the default, which is using keyboard. We want to use keyboard to move around and stuff. Let's see, we need to create a game screen manager. And basically two more things left, I think. Game screen manager needs to update, and it has game time. And also after clearing, we want to draw. Let's see, no, sprite batch. That's the name of it. And draw has game time. If we want to use it in the future, we could just add it to the game screen manager, which then, you know, also might need to call it in the game screen. We'll have to change just the game screens basically to also take one more parameter. Now, I think also I'll move this, because what this now symbolizes is, you know, the game will always update, and if you ever press back, it will just quit the game, like it will just exit. But if you're like in the main menu in my game that I showed you, and you press escape, it goes back to the start menu. So I don't want this as a rule, like if you ever press escape, you just exit. It's kind of, in the first demo, it kind of works. But now, I would like to call it only when we're in the startup game screen, because right now, we'll do this YouTube game project. Oh no, YouTube game, sorry, instance, and it has the input manager, and we can check if you have pressed back, and also it gets updated, right? Every time YouTube game is kind of updated, we update the input manager, so by now it's already updated. So we check, have we pressed back? If so, now actually, yeah, what we do here right now could be like quit equals true, just to also use that. We could say exit the game, but what we'll do is say quit is true, so that this one will automatically be thrown out of the game screen manager. It will be popped when it's true, and since there's no more game screens left, if that was the only one, it'll just exit. So that will kind of work automatically. There's one more thing to do then. I keep saying there's one more thing or two more things. Green is because I forget about game screen manager. Push new startup game screen. Now let's hope it works on the first try. I might have forgotten something, but I hope I didn't. Let's see. Please. Please, little. No, we missed something. Oh, yeah. Of course, and it was something really, really simple. When we initiate the Gamescreen Manager, it needs to just create and initialize the stack, or kind of create an instance of the stack, and that's it. Oh, that one line. We were one line away from having a just it work from the get-go. So if I press escape now, interesting. Okay, so I did have a problem. Wait, so game screen count was 0, or is 0, and it doesn't exit immediately. Is that the problem? It still does this. Stack empty. Okay, wait. Let me just see if this is easily fixed. We could just try a return here. Okay. That actually, okay, so I thought exit might just absolutely just kill it. What it does probably is kind of do the same kind of thing that game screen does. It sets a flag somewhere that says, by the way, when you're done updating, you can quit, okay? So what we do is we just say return. When you just return a void function, you just don't have to say anything more than, you know, it's sort of like quitting out early. So I guess you know that if you have programmed a bit of C# before. Okay, well, let me think here for a second. Is that it? Like, I think that's it, game screen. So my final words for game screens is basically what you'll, and we might go into that because we're going to create more game screens, right? This is a project that you can find on the GitHub, that YouTube game project, and it's going to have some kind of game kind of thing going. So we'll make startup game screen as some sort of menu, and we'll create a main game screen, and you'll see how we are going to kind of perhaps make a transition from start to game, and perhaps have it fade out and fade in and load these between each other. So we'll get to that part, but yeah, this video is surely longer than I had expected, but I guess it's quite a lengthy topic to discuss. But I hope you've learned something from it, and please leave a rating on the video if you liked or didn't like this video, and if you have any feedback, I welcome it wholeheartedly, so please put it in the comment field, and if you aren't subscribed already, please consider subscribing, and have an awesome day. Thank you so much.